Andrea Hollingsworth, welcome to the conversation today.
Hi, John. It's so awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is wonderful to be with you. You're joining us from Minnesota. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about radical self-compassion and mental health in the workplace, and really what leaders can do both for themselves and for their team to make sure that we're all taking care of each other in the modern workplace. It's complicated, it's messy out there, and it's only getting harder, I think, in the modern workplace. And as we pivot into the future of work. So this is what we'll be exploring. And as we get started, I wanted to share Andrea's bio with everybody. Dr. Andrea Hollingsworth is founder and CEO of Hollingsworth Consulting, author of the best-selling book, The Compassion Advantage: How Top Leaders Build More Humanizing Workplaces, and a leading global expert on compassion and self-compassion in life and leadership. I love all of that, Andrea, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you in the pre-interview, just getting to know you a little bit and talking about your
Hey,
background. Is
likewise.
there
Yeah.
anything you would like to share about your background with the audience before we dive on into the conversation?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Maybe a couple of fun facts. I used to be a professor just like you. And one of the things I talk about is radical self-compassion. And one of the things that's true of me is that I walked away from academia kind of at the height of my success, largely because my inner critic was really sabotaging my resilience in that workspace. And so one of the things I do is help leaders to um, work with their inner critic and get past that perfectionism that's holding them back, and it makes them a better leader in the end. Um, so another fun fact about me, just random, I'm a soccer mom. I have a
Mm.
seven-year-old boy named Bennett, and I love my home state. I've lived all over the country for my academic career, but now I'm home. I'm home in Minnesota, and I my favorite place. Um, Side note, if you've seen the recent Garfield movie, there's a minute there's a Minnesotan villain in that movie, the very first Minnesotan villain I've ever it's fabulous. Anyway, that's completely random.
You know,
I love the Did you see it?
I did go to see it with my kids. I'm now racking my brain to try to remember more about the villain, but I'm gonna have to.
It's the woman in the milk factory, the security guard.
That's right.
I'm like, how did they have a Minnesota villain? It was
That's
great.
excellent.
Anyway, we're off topic.
I'm from Missouri, so
Okay, yeah. You've got an
Anyways,
accent you
good
can whip out too.
Midwest pronunciations.
Yeah,
It's excellent.
yeah.
Well, thank you. A real pleasure, and I totally can relate to the academia piece.
The
You
pressure
know,
cooker.
and
Yeah.
it's man, it's not the topic for today, but and the workplace is a weird place, and academia
Mhm.
is like this own weird microcosm niche of the workplace.
Indeed.
And
Yeah.
academia today is weird, and I'll just
Yeah.
leave it at that. It's
Yep.
it's it's bizarre, and it's getting more
Yep.
bizarre each and every year. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. That is very true, and we'll just leave it. Yep. Yep.
All right. Well, okay. So let's talk about this idea of radical self-compassion that you were
Sure.
saying in the pre-interview that this is something that you really dove into during the pandemic. Can you tell us more about the kind of why behind that and
Sure.
what that exploration led you to?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I have a story about why I really started to dive in to this whole topic of self-compassion. It has to do with my burnout in my previous profession as a professor, and I can tell that story if you like. But basically, I was bludgeoning myself along with this inner message of I'm not good enough, and I probably never will be. And I completely burned out. I just couldn't do it anymore. But I find that message is really pertinent for people today. I began talking about self-compassion and compassionate, living and leading during the pandemic. There's a lot of like struggle and suffering out there today. I think for a minute when COVID started to sort of, ease up, we all thought, okay, we'll just get back to quote unquote normal, whatever that means. But, it's still really, really tough out there just on many, many levels. We've got politics, we've got the economy, we have a mental health crisis on our hands.
Yeah.
We have a climate crisis. We have so many layered stressors that people are dealing with. And it's a total pipe dream to think that people can leave that at the door when they come to work. And so uh, what I do is I help leaders, number one, work with their own, what I call, what research is called maladaptive perfectionism, and that inner critic and that pressure to be always on and to silence and stuff their own suffering, because that actually prevents them from being aware of the people that they're leading and empathetic and then action oriented in how they can help, the suffering of those on their team. It really does start with being kind to yourself. So I call it radical because we really need a high octane approach to being kind to ourselves, but also holding ourselves accountable. We live in a never enough society. Everywhere there's this message like, if you want success, respect, belonging, and love, you better be you better be, you better get the promotion. You better have more money. You better have the better house. You better have the better car. You better have the perfect family. You better have the perfect body. You better have the better sense of humor. There's so much pressure on us that we feel it. We're in this soup and we internalize it. And I think a lot of leaders walk around there thinking, I absolutely have to, I have to be on all the time. And they don't know when good enough is good enough. Now, I'm all for healthy striving, but there is something that can happen where people just become more isolated and more depressed and more anxious and less resilient and less connected to other people because they're really stuck in their own heads about their own worth. And that really does make an impact. So radical self-compassion. Sorry, I've been talking for a while. Do you have a question or anything? I can just keep
No,
going.
it's great. It's great.
Okay. Radical self-compassion involves, like, first of all, our brains, when we make a mistake or become aware of an imperfection, uh, if you look at the neuroscience of that, it's very interesting. That is processed in the anterior cingulate cortex, and that's the same
Mhm.
part of the brain that processes pain, physical pain. And so this means that when we're beating up on ourselves internally, it hurts, literally, like it's painful.
Yeah.
And you can't learn and grow from whatever it is, whatever mistake, whatever, if your brain is on fire in that threat detection mode, that fight, flight, flee, fawn, all that stuff. And so the first step is shifting from, that inner just humiliation and shaming to curiosity. Like, what happened? What's the situation on the ground? What, looking at it as data points, information instead of condemnation. I'll
Mm.
tell a story here. So recently I was, this is a few months ago. I was at my son's soccer game and I missed seeing a soccer goal because I was
Mm.
looking down. And you want to take a guess at what I was looking at?
Looking at your phone.
Most people guess that. It's close. I was looking at a screen. I was looking at my computer
Mm.
because I had justified bringing my computer to the game because I wanted to make progress on ironically, the book I was finishing on compassion. Oh my gosh, not a good mom moment. So I was like, well, I'll just putter away at this chapter while Bennett's not on the field. And it was the wrong call because I'll never forget his face. He came up to me after the game and he was like, Mom, I scored a goal. And when I looked over at you, you were looking down at your computer, Mom.
Oh.
You hurt my feelings so much. And, it was one of the lowest moments of, I try
And
to
how
be a
old is
great,
he?
he's 7. He's
Yeah,
7.
it's hard.
So it was a big deal. And so I was like, what are the data points here? What, like, it looks like I'm not as good at multitasking as I thought I was, right? That's a data point. B, like, okay, big plays can happen fast in kiddo soccer games. Time, I should not be looking down. I should not be distracted. I should, see, I hurt my son's feelings. We're gonna need to apologize here. So you get curious about like what are the facts? What are the situations instead of condemning yourself? The second step, do you want me to just keep going? Is that good, or do you want to pause
Yeah,
there?
no, this is a great story. Go for it.
Okay, yeah. It's a sad one, but it illustrates because of course, like in my old kind of shame-based maladaptive perfectionistic days, I would have immediately gone to like, I suck. I'm the world's most horrible mother. Like I'm fundamentally flawed and I'm never going to get better, which is just the voice of shame, right?
Yeah.
And if you've got that voice happening in your head after you make any kind of mistake or have any kind of imperfection or flaw, it's going to prevent you from showing up in the ways that you want and need to show up in your personal and professional life. I promise you it will. So anyway, and then the second thing is just to connect. So curiosity is step one. Step two is connection. So here you reach out to people who can assure you that like you're not alone. You know, you're a human like the rest of us. And also this mistake or this flaw, whatever, doesn't define you. You're bigger and better and stronger and more well-rounded, integrated person than whatever just happened. So in this case, there was a soccer mom who had been sitting next to me and had watched the entire train wreck happen. Her name was Cecilia. She's a friend of mine. And she didn't say anything in the moment, but when I got home and I was making Bennett some macaroni and cheese and hot dogs, God help me, um, we need to get more nutrition in our house. But
He probably loved it.
he loved it, of course. Yeah. So I texted Cecilia and I was like, such a bad mom moment, with like the crying emoji and and the irony that I was working on a book on compassion too, right? And she texted me right back and she said, like you're an amazing mom. Don't beat yourself up. You've seen so many, great moments with Bennett and you'll see so many more. But yes, the irony that you were working on your compassion book while so she didn't minimize it, but she also didn't um, amplify it. And so she empathized, right? And assured me. And then, so connection just connecting. We want to hide. Our brains
Yeah.
tell us, there's this evolutionary history of like, when we become aware of anything we don't love about ourselves, we don't want to connect with people. Um, Way back in the Paleolithic, when humans lived in hunter-gatherer groups, when if I were to do something that would like piss off my tribe members too much, what might happen?
I mean, yeah, you could literally get kicked out, which
Yeah,
means you probably die, right?
exactly. Exactly. Like Alone. It's like that show Naked and Afraid. Do you ever watch that? It's
I
like, except,
haven't, but yeah, I know.
yeah, you know of it. It's like you can't tap out and,
Yeah.
get your granola bar and go home to the suburbs. Anyway, our brains tell us, no, imperfections mean you're not safe and you might die. So that's very old evolutionarily speaking. And so we have to consciously be like, no, I'm going to connect so that I can get over this. And then the third step is commitment. 3 C's: curiosity, connection, and commitment. What are we committing to? Well, first of all, working to be more kind to the way that we talk to ourselves in our own minds. That actually does matter, and it's big in terms of mental health. And so, you know, um, I like to do this exercise with audiences where I have them think about something that they regret, like something that happened or they did or said that they just are not loving, right? They think about it and they notice, what is their inner critic telling them about this, right? And it's usually very, very harsh. And you know, think about something that you recently said or did, John, that you're not loving. Like, can you get in touch with like what's that, like that kind of gnarly inner part of you telling you? Like, you don't have to tell me, but I'm sure it's not very nice, right? And so I have them notice what their inner critic is telling them. And then imagine that your best friend just came to you and said, look, I need help. I need your support because I'm struggling with this thing. And it's the very thing you yourself were just thinking about. They made the same mistake. They said the same thing.
Hmm.
They're not loving the same thing about themselves. And they come to you and they're like, I need help. And then I have the audience members, um, go ahead and real time act out. What would you say to your friend who needed your support? And what I hear is things like, you know, um, Oh, I've done that before. You're not alone. You were doing the best you could in the moment. That doesn't define you. And so we're much easier at extending that to other people than we are to ourselves. And so then I ask people to take whatever they said to their best friend and turn it back on themselves, right? To say, like, I was doing the best I could. I'm only human, you know? I'm going to learn from this and grow and do better next time, kind of thing. But then the other pieces to commitment is you commit to uh, accountability. So, if you don't want to repeat the mistake or whatever it was, you look for structures, systems, people, accountability buddies, things that can help you not do it anymore. And there are times in our lives where, and our leadership journeys too, where we need a little bit of help, like because this thing keeps going wrong. We need to reach out. We need more support. And, we have to actively find ways to protect ourselves, provide for ourselves, and motivate ourselves to change. And so that's also a big part of self-compassion, of course, but you don't do it with shame. You do it with, hey, I'm learning and I'm gonna do it better next time because I'm a human being. And this is all a journey. So uh
Yeah. As you were describing that situation, first of all, I can relate. I have 6 children. I've had those moments. I mean, you're just busy and you're trying to juggle
yeah,
1,000 things and you want to be there for every last moment, and it's just impossible. And
yep,
so, you're going to be there for lots of stuff and you're going to miss lots of stuff.
yeah,
And the best thing you can do is just to give them a hug and acknowledge it and say you're
yeah.
sorry and be there for the next thing, right?
Hmm.
And they'll forgive you. And it's the same thing in the workplace, as a leader.
Yes,
Like,
it
I'm
is.
not going to be perfect. I'm going to get stuff wrong. I'm going to miss
Yeah.
stuff. I'm going to get stuff right. I'm going to miss stuff. But as long as I put my best foot forward and I try, and
Mhm.
then I acknowledge when I mess stuff up, like
Yeah,
that's all my team expects. Like, they don't expect me to be perfect, but they
yeah,
also don't want me to gaslight them, right? And
right.
so I just, like you said the word accountability, and that's really
Yes.
important. And
Hmm.
it's the difference between, like, as you were describing all of this, I was thinking, we all know people
Hmm.
who have no sense of shame, guilt, or
Yeah.
accountability. So
Yes.
they do things that are hurtful to people,
Yes.
and they don't care. they
Yep.
and they don't feel bad about it. And
Yeah.
and it bugs us to death, right?
Yeah. There's
And
something there's something
there's
in
something
there.
wrong
There's a
with
category in the DSM actually for that. But anyway.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And but most people aren't like that. Most people aren't like
exactly.
that. And most
Yeah.
people, when they do something that hurts someone else, they know it, they
Yeah.
recognize it, they feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and so practicing this compassion, most people, human to human, we're pretty good at extending grace to each other. We're pretty
Hmm.
good at being patient with each other, and we're pretty good at showing some compassion to each other because we recognize that we're not perfect. We recognize we all fall down, et cetera, et cetera. But we do struggle to do that for ourselves. And I'm not quite sure why. You probably know a lot more about the why behind that than I
Yeah.
do. But the reality is, whatever the why is for each individual person, we do need to be able to take a step back and to just realize beating ourselves up doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't, like, if I just sit there ruminating, like if you were to just sit there ruminating in that moment with your son and spend the rest of the night beating yourself up,
Yeah.
all that does is mean you're going to miss the rest of those moments the rest of the night with your son, right?
Correct. You're gonna
Instead of being able to
exactly.
make it
It
better,
disconnects you from people.
it
Hmm.
disconnects you. Yeah.
Hmm.
And the
Yeah.
same thing in the workplace. Like, all
Exactly.
it does is it just means you're going to miss all of the other opportunities for connection, for
Yep.
meaningful mentorship and coaching and all the other things that are
Correct.
going to matter for those
Correct.
people. And so we got to give ourselves a break.
Yeah.
And and that's what they need. They want to be given a break. We need to give ourselves a break.
Yeah, I amen to all that. And I also, there's something that can happen when we're really being hard on ourselves to our own nervous systems. That
Mm,
there's a lot of anxiety, right? Have you ever been around somebody who just oozes criticality towards themselves and
mm.
other people? You can just feel it, right? And some of your listeners are out there thinking like, my boss is that person. Right? And and so when leaders can learn to work with themselves in a different way with their own imperfections and and share sometimes. There was a study, I think it was Adam Grant and his team that put out a study not too long ago. um, Managers were so in the in one group, the managers were asked to share with their team members the growth areas that they themselves needed to work on from that came from their higher up. Okay. And then in the control group, I think the managers were asked to ask for feedback from their team members about their own leadership style. Okay. And at the end of the study, I forget what the positive was. It was something like, you know, employee trust or connection or resilience or something like that. Like I'm botching this study, but like the good stuff happened, like in the manager team member relationship. The good stuff happened when the leaders were vulnerable with their own growth areas, with
Yeah.
their direct reports. And so I think that speaks to just a different approach to our own imperfections, and being just a little bit more like lightening up about them, and being vulnerable enough to say like, hey, I'm human too, and here's what I'm working on, and I know you've got things you are working on too. And that is going to boost just morale. It's going to help those relationships grow in the workplace, which are so, so, so important to ease everybody's suffering and help everybody feel a little bit more human at work.
Yeah. Andrea, we have only scratched the surface. There's so much more I want to talk about with this topic, but I also know you're on a hard stop. You need to get out of here. I
I
need to let you go.
do. I do.
So we need to wrap things up. But before we close, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word before we close.
Yeah. I'd love to connect with anyone listening. So my website is hollingsworthconsulting.com. I do keynote speaking. I do workshops for leaders, management groups, and I also do coaching for leaders. And so, yeah, you can go to hollingsworthconsulting.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Andrea Hollingsworth, PhD. And then I just did publish that book that I was finishing up at the soccer game. It indeed did get done, in a much less relationship, uh, destroying way. No, it didn't destroy my relationship with my son, but it did get finished. I didn't work on it at any more soccer games though, but it's done and it's out there, and you can find it on Amazon, or you can find it on Barnes and Noble. It's called The Compassion Advantage: How Top Leaders Build More Humanizing Workplaces.
Wonderful. It has just been a real pleasure talking with you. Again, there's so much more to
Yeah.
explore. That's why it's wonderful that you have a book. People go check it out, go find the book, learn more about what Andrea is all about, connect with her, find out more about how she can help you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and
Yes.
purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.